Hi, first grade. We're learning our last category of strokes today, or our last category of letters that have a certain kind of stroke. So tomorrow we'll be able to do our first two-letter phonogram, and then we'll just be moving on from that. So great work, keep it up. I do want to remind you to make sure that you're following the way that we write the letters. That way it becomes automatic for us. And so instead of having to think, no, how do I make a p? Or, oh no, how do I make a b? We're going over this so much so it becomes automatic for us. And so then when we start spelling, we'll be ready. Because if we're still trying to remember how do we make p or how do we make z, then that's going to hold us back in our spelling. So the reason I'm making an hour of videos for you each day is so you practice for an hour writing your letters correctly. So please, please do that. It will be a great help to you in the future. All right, so today you'll want the piece of paper that has a dot at the dotted line because that will be our starting spot. All right, so get that out, but I want you to watch first. So the new strokes that we're going to learn today are called slant stroke letters. So a slant, right, is something that's not straight across or straight up and down. So a slant could be like this, or like this, or like this. Those are all different kinds of slants. So I want you to watch. I'm just going to do a few slant strokes first. My slant strokes always start at the dotted line, and they always go forward to the baseline. So I'm going to start at the dotted line and go forward to the baseline. So forward meaning in the direction we read and write. It's going in that direction even though it's slanted. All right, watch one more time. I always start my slant stroke at the dotted line and I always go forward and down to the baseline. So all right, where are you going to start your slant stroke? Good, at the dotted line. And which direction are you going to go? Good, forward. And where are you going to stop your slant stroke? Excellent, at the baseline. So I want you to very carefully and beautifully make a few slant strokes. If you aren't starting at the dotted line or if you're going below the baseline, I want you to cross it out and redo it. All right, so our letters that we're learning today are all going to use our slant strokes. All right, so our first slant stroke we're going to learn, slant stroke letter, we're going to learn is this. It says v. Say that with me. V. One more time. V. And now by yourself. Good. V. All right, your pencil should be down. Watch how we write our V. So it's a slant stroke letter. We know we're going to start at the dotted line. So we'll pull a slant stroke down to touch the baseline, and we want it to be about half the length of a clock stroke. Then we're going to push a backward slant up to touch the dotted line. And so we want the distance between our starting and ending points to be about the width of a clock stroke. So that's something that's going to take some practice, right? So if you're making them too big or too small, that's all right. It takes a while to get used to it, but of course, just make sure you're doing your best. All right, I want you to watch again. And all my slant stroke letters are going to start close to the margin or the last letter that I wrote. Remember, all of our letters, we start close to the margin or the last letter. And then sometimes we go over a clock space, but just if it's a clock letter. Everything else, we stay close to our last letter. All right, so I'm going to start where? Good, at the dotted line, and I'm going to pull a slant stroke down to touch the baseline. I want that to be about half the width of a clock stroke. And then I'm going to push a slant stroke up to the dotted line. That is my V. All right, talk through it with me while I write it, and then it's your turn. So what are we going to write? Good. V. So we'll start where? Good. At the dotted line, close to our last letter, we'll pull a slant stroke down to the baseline and push a slant stroke up to the dotted line. And we want this to be about the length of a clock space. We don't have to say that while we're writing it, just talking about the strokes we're making, but remember, we want this to be about as big as a clock stroke. All right, so if it's too big or too small, just try and do closer to a clock stroke next time. All right, pick up your pencil. It is your turn. What sound are we going to write? Good. V. And what kind of a letter is V? Good. It is a slant stroke letter. So where are we going to start? Excellent. We're going to start at the dotted line. Right? So we'll pull a slant stroke down to touch the baseline, and then we'll push a backward slant stroke up to touch the dotted line. What did you just write? Good. And make sure your V, check and see if it's about the length of a clock space or about the width of a clock space. If it is, great job. If not, just try and get it a little closer next time. All right, so we'll write some more. Start it close to your last one. And where's the starting spot for our slant stroke letters? Good, at the dotted line. All right, talk through it with me. Pull a slant stroke down to touch the baseline and push a backward slant up to touch the dotted line. What did you write? Very good. All right, find your starting spot again. Where is it? Good, it's at the dotted line. And what are we going to write? Good. All right, so talk through it with me. Pull a slant stroke down to touch the baseline and push a slant stroke up to touch the dotted line. What does that say, class? Good. Okay. Let's do another one. Find that starting spot. Remember, start it close to your last one. Oh. I forgot to erase our letters because we don't want to be copying. We want to be thinking through how we make the letter until it becomes automatic to us. All right, so find your starting spot. And what kind of a letter is V? Good, it is a slant stroke letter. All right, so starting at the dotted line, pull a slant stroke down to touch the baseline and push a slant stroke up to touch the dotted line. All right, check and see if it's about the length of a clock or about the width of a clock stroke. If it is, that's great. If not, just try and get closer next time. All right, what sound did you just write? Good. All right, we'll do another one. Find your starting spot. What kind of a letter is V? Good, it's a slant stroke letter. So from that starting spot, pull a slant stroke down to touch the baseline and push a slant stroke, a backward slant up to touch the dotted line. All right, what did you just write? Good. All right, so let's go back to our chart with our different kind of strokes. And another teacher was using this, so they erased it, but that's great because it gives us a chance to review our strokes. What is the first stroke that we learned that starts over a space just below the dotted line, touch 2 on the clock? Excellent, that is our clock stroke. So we always start at 2, go around, and that is our clock stroke. And then what's the stroke? The line stroke that starts right at the dotted line. Good, that's our short line stroke. So we started at the dotted line, pull a straight line down to the baseline and lift. Okay, what's the stroke we learned that starts at the top baseline? Good, that is our tall line stroke. So we start at the top baseline and pull a straight line down to the baseline and then lift. Notice that I'm being careful not to go below, but I'm also making sure I get all the way down. If we focus on that, that will help our letters be really beautiful. All right, the next stroke goes in the direction we read and write, but we also have to know the starting spot. What kind of a stroke is that? That one is a dash stroke. Remember, we use that one with our Z and with our et. So it could start either at the dotted line, or where does our et start? Good, halfway between the dotted line and the baseline. And it's about the width of a clock stroke, and it always goes in the direction we read and write. All right, so now we can add our last stroke in, which is the stroke we just learned. Where does that stroke start? Where does our slant stroke start? Good, it always starts at the dotted line, and it always goes forward and down to the baseline. So these are all of the kinds of letters. All of them start with one of these kinds of strokes. So now we know all the strokes we need to write any word in English, which I think is pretty neat.